The 1950s mixed rock and roll with Cold War fears, TV dinners with teenage rebellion. Cars became rolling symbols of hope, dripping with chrome and confidence. Hidden among them were these 12 legends that lit the spark for the horsepower battles ahead. Number 12. 1950 Studebaker Commander Starlight Coupe. The 1950 Studebaker Commander Starlight Coupe looked like it was smiling at you with a chrome nose that people still talk about today. Have you ever seen a car that made you stop and wonder, wait, is it driving toward me or away from me? Well, that is exactly what this car did back in the 1950s. Its back end looked almost like a front hood, and that confused plenty of people on the street. Some folks laughed, some scratched their heads, and some fell in love with its bold design. But let us take a peek at what made this car so special beyond its funny looks. First, the Commander's Starlight Coupe came with a 245 cubic inch inline six-cylinder engine. That is a long way of saying it had plenty of smooth power, about 102 horsepower. Compare that to its little brother, the Studebaker Champion, which had only 85 horsepower, and you can already tell which one sounded more exciting when the driver pressed the gas pedal. Now, how did it ride? The Commander had a 120-inch wheelbase, so it stretched longer than the Champion, which had only 113 inches. That longer frame made it feel steady on the road. Studebaker even made sure the car came with automatic drive as standard equipment, which was a big deal back then. Imagine telling your grandpa in 1950, no need to fuss with all those gear shifts anymore. That was futuristic driving. And then came the famous bullet nose. Picture the front of the car with a shiny chrome centerpiece that looked almost like a rocket ready to take off. The bullet nose stayed with Studebaker cars all the way through 1952. Drivers loved pointing to it like a badge of honor. Can you guess how many people bought these cars? In 1950, Studebaker sold 320,884 vehicles. Out of those, the Commander made up about 22% of sales, which is no small number when you think about how many families were choosing the cheaper Champion instead. But here is the fun part. What if you saw one today? Many survive in what collectors call unrestored condition. That means you might see faded paint or worn seats, but everything is still complete, waiting for a little love. Some owners restore them until they sparkle like new, while others simply fix the mechanical parts and proudly drive them as living time capsules. Number 11, 1951 Hudson Hornet. The 1951 Hudson Hornet was the kind of car that could make even race champions sweat when they saw it pull up. Now you might be wondering, what made this Hornet so buzzworthy? Let's start with its secret weapon, a 308 cubic inch six-cylinder engine that packed 145 horsepower. Back then, most people thought only big V8 engines could be powerful, but the Hornet laughed at that idea. In fact, this Hornet's six-cylinder was stronger than the new V8 engines from Cadillac and Oldsmobile. Surprised? So were they. But the Hornet was not only about power, it had brains in its design too. Hudson had something they called the step-down body. Picture this. Instead of climbing into the car like most vehicles, you actually step down into it, almost like stepping into a little boat. This clever trick meant the car had a lower center of gravity, which made it hug the road like glue and kept passengers safer. Drivers felt like they were sitting inside the car rather than on top of it, and that made it handle like a dream. Hudson was way ahead of its time with this unit body construction. Of course, every car needs style, and the Hornet knew how to shine. It carried a gold and chrome Skyliner hood ornament up front, little Hornet medallions on the doors, and even badges of power shaped like rockets on the sides. Talk about confidence. Inside, you could find deluxe hand grips, robe hangers, and even pockets stitched into the seat backs, making it feel like a rolling living room. Now let's talk size. The Hudson Hornet sat on a wheelbase of 123.8 inches. That is long enough to give you a smooth ride, but short enough to still look sporty. The Hornet came in many flavors too: sedan, club coupe, convertible brougham, and Hollywood hardtop. In its very first year, Hudson built 43,666 Hornets, and every single one carried that same proud, buzzing nameplate. But here is where things get really exciting. Do you know what happened when the Hornet showed up on the racetrack? Between 1951 and 1954, it crushed the competition. In 1951 alone, the Hornet won 13 races. The next year it was 49, and the year after that it was 46. Drivers like Herb Thomas and Marshall Teague became legends behind the wheel of these fabulous Hudson Hornets. Other manufacturers scratched their heads and wondered, how is a six-cylinder winning against us? The answer was simple: better engineering, better balance, and better handling. By late 1951, Hudson dealers added something extra called twin H-power. Instead of one carburetor, the Hornet now had two, and that boosted horsepower to 160 with 257 pounds-foot of torque. Imagine a car that could carry a family to church on Sunday and then win a stock car race on Monday. That was the magic of the Hudson Hornet. Number 10, 1953 Buick Roadmaster Riviera. For the 1953 Buick Roadmaster Riviera, people stop, stare, and whisper, "Now that is fancy." But what made it so special compared to other Buicks rolling around in the early 1950s? First, 1953 was no ordinary year for Buick. It was the very first time they used their own high-compression V8 engine. Imagine the excitement when drivers turned the key and heard all that smooth power waiting to hit the road. It was like Buick had been practicing for years and finally said, "Okay, world, now watch this." The Riviera itself was a design that felt modern and stylish in every way. It was built without a central pillar between the windows, so when the glass rolled down, the whole side looked wide open, giving it a fancy and breezy look. Buyers could even choose options like power windows and power seats, which back then felt almost like space-age gadgets. No cranking a handle, just press a button and up or down the glass went. And how about colors? One of the most striking shades was mandarin red, a color that made the Riviera look like it was always ready for a parade. Paired with polished chrome trim, it turned heads everywhere it went. But that's not all. While everyone loved the Riviera, Buick also introduced something even wilder that same year, the Skylark convertible. Only 1,690 Skylarks were made, costing about $5,000 each, which was a fortune in 1953. The Roadmaster Estate station wagon also appeared, still wearing real wood panels, making it the very last wood-bodied wagon mass-produced in America. But the Riviera Model 76R held its own as a handsome, luxurious car. Out of all Roadmasters that year, a grand total of 79,137 were sold, and plenty of proud owners felt like they were riding in Buick's crown jewel. Number 9, 1953 Packard Caribbean. So how did Packard, an old company known for quiet luxury, suddenly drop a convertible that looked like it was ready for Hollywood? The answer begins in October of 1952, when Packard decided to build a special sports car of its own. The Caribbean was born, inspired by a flashy show car called the Pan American. And just like that, Packard gave the world something bold, stylish, and very different from what people expected. Now let's talk numbers, because this Caribbean was no bargain bin ride. It carried a price tag of $5,210, which was more than $1,000 higher than Cadillac's Series 62 convertible. Why charge so much? Because Packard wanted this car to scream top of the line, and buyers got what they paid for. Designer Dick Teague, a young talent with an eye for clever facelifts, was in charge of the look. He took Packard's Series 250 convertible body and gave it a makeover that turned heads. Imagine rounded rear wheel openings, shiny chrome trim tracing the lines of the car, bold taillights borrowed from senior Packards, and even a spare tire mounted outside in what folks called the Continental style. On top of that, the hood carried a sporty air scoop, and the wheels sparkled with wire spokes. From every angle, the Caribbean announced itself with quiet confidence. But was it only about looks? Absolutely not. Under the long body sat Packard's trusty straight 8 engine with 327 cubic inches of power, producing 180 horsepower. Buyers could also choose Packard's Ultramatic transmission, which made driving smooth without constant gear shifting. Even though other car makers were switching to new V8 engines, Packard's straight 8 still held its own and kept drivers smiling. The Caribbean also spoiled passengers with luxury touches. Everyone came with full leather interiors, carefully stitched by hand, and each car was painted in one of four elegant colors: Polaris Blue, Gulf Green, Matador Maroon, or Sahara Sand. Can you imagine choosing between those? It was like picking which crown jewel you wanted to wear. Production began in March of 1953. Later than planned, but still, Packard managed to finish 750 of them by year's end. That was more than Cadillac's Eldorado at 532 cars, and more than Oldsmobile's Fiesta at 458 cars, though Buick topped them all with 1,690 Skylarks. For Packard, it was a proud victory that proved people wanted their daring new convertible. And here's something fun. Despite its big personality, the Caribbean carried no flashy nameplate on the body in 1953. If you wanted to know what it was, you had to look closely or just ask the lucky driver rolling by with the top down. Number 8. 1954 Kaiser Darrin 161. The 1954 Kaiser Darrin 161 made people's jaws drop before the engine even started. But who exactly dreamed up this wild machine? His name was Howard "Dutch" Darrin, a designer who never took no for an answer. When Kaiser Motors wasn't interested in his ideas, Darrin secretly built his own clay model on the chassis of the little Henry J car. He then teamed up with a company called Glasspar to turn it into fiberglass, a material so new at the time that people thought it was closer to science fiction than car making. Now here's the fun twist. Henry J. Kaiser himself, the big boss, hated the car when he first saw it. He said his company made family cars, not fancy sports cars. But his much younger wife loved it so much, she said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. And guess what? Her opinion won the day. Without her, the Kaiser Darrin would have never been born. When the car made its big public debut in 1953 at the Los Angeles Motorama, people went crazy for it. By springtime of 1953, the final production version was shown in New York, and by January of 1954, the Kaiser Darrin 161 was ready for buyers. And it even beat Chevrolet's Corvette to market by a few months, becoming America's very first fiberglass production sports car. So what made it different? For starters, those sliding doors. Instead of opening outward, they slid forward, right into the front fenders. Darrin had patented the idea years earlier, and it gave the car a magical, almost spaceship vibe. And then there was the nose with a grill shaped like a wide-open smile. Some said it looked like a guppy fish, gasping for air. But hey, nobody forgot it once they saw it. Underneath that fiberglass body was the 161 cubic inch Willys Hurricane 6-cylinder engine, producing 90 horsepower. Sure, it wasn't a speed demon, but it was reliable and came with either a 3-speed manual or an optional automatic. Many later cars even got upgrades like superchargers or, in a few rare cases, Cadillac V8 engines that turned them into serious performers. The Kaiser Darrin was expensive, costing $3,668, which was a big sum in 1954. Only 435 were ever made, making it one of the rarest American sports cars of the decade. And here's a bit of drama. 50 of them got damaged in a storm, and instead of tossing them out, Darrin himself grabbed them, repaired them, and sold them from his Hollywood shop. He even added performance upgrades for some lucky buyers. With its fiberglass body, unforgettable sliding doors, and a story filled with stubborn designers, persuasive wives, and storm-damaged leftovers turned into stars, the Kaiser Darrin 161 became a true legend of the 1950s. Number 7, 1954 Nash Metropolitan. The 1954 Nash Metropolitan made big cars look like they had eaten too many hamburgers. So why would Nash, a company famous for making large family rides, suddenly surprise everyone with something so small? Well, President George Mason thought America was ready for something fun-sized. While every other car maker kept bragging about being bigger and heavier, Nash said, "Let's give people something tiny, cheerful, and different." And out rolled the Metropolitan, ready to prove that small could still feel special. Not only this, the Metropolitan was the very first car designed in America, but built across the ocean in England, then shipped right back for American drivers. And get this, Every Metropolitan sold actually helped count against England's World War II debt to the United States. So yes, buying one wasn't just stylish, it was also kind of patriotic math. Now let's talk size. The wheelbase was only 85 inches, which made it even shorter than the Volkswagen Beetle. That meant you could fit it in tight spaces that other cars would huff and puff trying to squeeze into. And yet, despite its small frame, the Metropolitan still looked like a real American car, with styling that resembled Nash's bigger models. The design had fun touches like a pretend hood scoop that didn't actually scoop anything, a spare tire mounted on the back like a jaunty backpack, and paint choices so bright and colorful they reminded one stylist of Neapolitan ice cream. Imagine a car in Caribbean blue or canyon red, with a creamy white roof. It was basically rolling dessert on wheels. Inside, the little Met didn't skimp on comfort. It came with an AM radio, turn signals, foam cushioned seats, and even a weather eye heating and ventilation system, all things that usually cost extra in other cars. The seats were covered in a mix of real leather and nylon cloth, which gave them a fancy feel far beyond their small size. But you're probably wondering, how did it drive? Power came from a 4-cylinder engine that displaced 73 cubic inches. It had 4-ring pistons and was paired with a transmission that was a bit unusual. It looked like a 4-speed, but the first gear was blocked off, so drivers mostly used the top 3. The shifter wasn't on the floor either. Instead, it poked out from the dashboard under the steering wheel, since Nash believed Americans would like that better. The ride itself was a mix of British firmness and American softness. The front suspension used coil springs, while the back rode on semi-elliptic leaf springs. With its short wheelbase, the ride could get a little bouncy, but overall it was smoother than many European imports of the day. In its first year alone, 11,198 Metropolitans were built, and from 1954 through 1961, more than 94,000 rolled out, proving that a small car could make a very large impact. Number 6. 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air. The 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air was a rolling invitation to join the cool kids club. Why did everyone call it the hot one? Well, Chevrolet had finally decided it was time to mix stylish design with real power, and boy, did it work. The Bel Air came out with all new looks that made other cars feel like they were stuck in last year's dance. It was long at 16 feet, low to the ground, and carried a shiny sweep sight wraparound windshield that made drivers feel like they were sitting in a jet cockpit. The wheelbase stayed at 115 inches, which kept things balanced, but the styling grabbed everyone's attention. Up front, the car wore an egg crate grille, chrome spears on the fenders, and hooded headlights that looked like eyebrows raised in surprise. Stainless steel trim lined the windows, while the wheel covers sparkled like fancy dress shoes. Later in the year, Chevrolet even added the Bel Air name in shiny gold letters, just in case you forgot how special it was. But here's the question. What made people truly fall in love with the Bel Air? The answer came with 3 little letters: V8. Chevrolet introduced its brand new 265 cubic inch Turbo Fire V8 engine. At first, it made 162 horsepower with a 2-barrel carburetor. Then came the Power Pack option, bumping things up to 180 horsepower with a 4-barrel carburetor. And if that wasn't enough, the Super Power Pack added high compression for even more punch. Can you guess how fast it was? Popular mechanics clocked the Bel Air V8 at 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 12.9 seconds, which was lightning quick for a car weighing 3,300 pounds. The base 6-cylinder engine, the trusty Stovebolt 6, stayed in the lineup with 123 horsepower, but most buyers couldn't resist the magic of the V8. And with options like the 3-speed Synchro Mesh manual, overdrive, or the smooth 2-speed Powerglide automatic, drivers could choose their style of fun. Chevrolet didn't stop with power, it wanted comfort too. The Bel Air introduced a 12-volt electrical system, tubeless tires, and the new Glide Ride suspension with ball joints that made it handle smoothly. Air conditioning even became available, a big deal in the mid-1950s. Inside, carpets, chrome headliner bands, and armrests gave the Bel Air a premium feel, reminding drivers they were in the top trim line. And talk about popularity. Chevrolet built hundreds of thousands of Bel Airs in 1955, including convertibles, hardtops, sedans, wagons, and even the flashy two-door Nomad wagon. Even Motor Trend praised its ride and handling, while everyday folks loved that it combined style, power, and comfort in one shiny package. Number 5. 1955 Ford Thunderbird. The 1955 Ford Thunderbird was a car that turned heads the moment it rolled into the spotlight. Ford revealed it to the world at the Detroit Auto Show on February 20th, 1954. By September 9th, the first car was ready, and by October 22nd, it was officially on sale. People were so excited that 3,500 orders came in during the first 10 days. Ford thought they would only make 10,000, but by the end of the year, they sold 16,155. Now, what made this car so special? Unlike the European sports cars of the time, the Thunderbird was created as what Ford called a personal car. That meant it was sporty and fun, but also filled with comfort and luxury. It only seated 2 passengers, which made it feel exclusive, almost like having front-row tickets to every drive. Under the long hood, the Thunderbird carried a 292 cubic inch V8 engine known as the Y-Block. This engine gave the car 198 horsepower, which was plenty to make the Thunderbird zoom down highways at speeds between 100 and 150 miles per hour, depending on the transmission. That was flying fast for the mid-1950s. Speaking of transmissions, buyers could choose between a 3-speed manual or the smooth Ford-O-Matic automatic. A removable fiberglass hardtop was included, but many owners also added a folding soft top for sunny days. The exhaust pipes were cleverly tucked into twin bumper guards at the rear, giving the back of the car a stylish, futuristic touch. Inside, the Thunderbird was loaded with features that made drivers feel spoiled. Power steering, power brakes, power seats, and power windows were all available. There was also a telescoping steering wheel, a tachometer, push-button door handles, and even an AM town and country radio that could search for stations on its own. 4-way powered seats meant drivers could adjust until they felt like they were sitting in a living room armchair. The car itself was built on a 102-inch wheelbase, the same length as the Corvette, but the Thunderbird had something its rival didn't: comfort. It was a rare 2-seater from an American company, built not for racing, but for cruising in style. With its wraparound windshield, sporty lines, and powerful V8, the 1955 Thunderbird was a symbol of the booming optimism of the 1950s. Number 4. 1955 Chrysler 300. The 1955 Chrysler 300 roared its name right into racing history. Chrysler introduced it as the first of its famous letter series, and it quickly gained a reputation that made people sit up straighter. Why the number 300? Because it was the first American production car to reach 300 horsepower, a number no other car in showrooms could match at the time. Imagine telling your friends you drove the most powerful car in America. That was the kind of bragging rights this coupe delivered. The car was built on the New Yorker's chassis, but given extra touches borrowed from the Imperial and Windsor, plus its own bold styling. Virgil Exner, Chrysler's star designer, gave the 300 its unforgettable look with an egg crate grille, round headlights framed in chrome, and even small tail fins at the rear. Those fins would soon grow taller and wider on American cars, but here they were just a stylish hint of what was to come. The roofline curved back over a wraparound rear window, giving the car a fast, dramatic profile. But the question everyone wanted answered was simple: how fast was it? Thanks to the firepower Hemi 58, the answer was very fast. The 331 cubic inch engine used hemispherical combustion chambers, solid valve lifters, and dual 4-barrel carburetors. Together, these gave it exactly 300 horsepower and 345 pound-feet of torque. On top of that, in Daytona Beach, racer Tim Flock drove a C300 to an average of 127.58 miles per hour over a flying mile, more than 7 miles faster than its closest competitor. That victory helped him capture the NASCAR Grand National Championship in 1955, proving this car wasn't just about style, it was about winning. Inside, the C300 carried the luxury Chrysler customers expected. Leather seats filled the cabin, and the dashboard had large, round gauges that made the driver feel in command of something special. A 2-spoke steering wheel gave a clear view of the speedometer, which stretched all the way to 150 miles per hour. Heavy-duty suspension, lowered ride height, and an improved PowerFlight automatic transmission kept everything working smoothly at high speeds. Even the exhaust pipes were slightly larger than those on other Chrysler models, a small detail that made a big difference. Only 1,725 examples of the 1955 Chrysler 300 were built, but its influence spread far beyond its production numbers. With racing trophies, jaw-dropping power, and elegant design, it earned the nickname America's greatest performing motor car. Number 3. 1956 Lincoln Continental Mark II. The 1956 Lincoln Continental Mark II simply whispered elegance, and everyone listened. When it rolled into the spotlight at the Paris Salon in October of 1955, people immediately noticed that this wasn't just another American car stuffed with chrome and fins. Instead, the Mark II stood tall with long, graceful lines, a calm but powerful presence, and a style that still turns heads today. Why did it look so different? Because a team led by William Clay Ford, John Reinhardt, and Gordon Buick decided that sometimes less sparkle means more class. The heart of this refined beauty was a 368 cubic inch overhead valve V8 engine. It had a single 4-barrel carburetor and produced 285 horsepower at 4,800 revolutions per minute. That kind of strength meant it could glide down highways with the kind of confidence you expect from a car built for both comfort and performance. Coupled with a 3-speed automatic transmission, the ride was smooth, steady, and effortless, almost like the car knew how to make long drives feel short. But how did it feel on the road? Imagine sitting behind the wheel, your hands wrapped around a 2-spoke steering wheel, while the car floated along thanks to its independent front suspension and live rear axle. 4-wheel drum brakes brought everything to a safe stop, but the fun was really in the journey. Even though it weighed 4,800 pounds and sat on a wheelbase of 126 inches, the Mark II carried its size with perfect proportions, never looking bulky, only refined. Step inside, and the magic continued. The cabin was covered in rich leather, soft carpeting, and polished trim that felt more like a private lounge than an automobile. Standard features included power steering, power brakes, and even power seats. A radio and heater kept passengers happy, while white-wall tires framed the car with timeless flair. There were also clever design touches, like a spare tire integrated smoothly into the trunk lid, a playful nod to the earlier Continental models. The Lincoln Continental Mark II wasn't mass-produced the way other cars were. Every one of the just over 3,000 examples built went through careful hands, with strict quality control, making sure no detail was missed. That kind of attention gave the car an air of exclusivity, the type of presence that made people stop and stare wherever it went. Number 2. 1956 Plymouth Fury. The 1956 Plymouth Fury arrived with golden trim and a bold heart, and from the first glance, it looked ready to race the wind. Back in the early 1950s, Plymouth was known for making cars that were reliable, but a little too plain. Drivers trusted them, yes, but nobody called them exciting. That began to change when Chrysler introduced designer Virgil Exner's forward look in 1955. Suddenly, cars had sharp lines, stylish tails, and a presence that made people turn their heads on the street. Plymouth sales soared, and the company was ready for something even more daring. But what would that daring step look like? That answer came in the form of the Fury. The Fury first appeared in 1956, not as its own model, but as a special version of the Plymouth Belvedere. Unlike the standard cars, it was offered only as a 2-door hardtop, giving it a sportier stance. It wore special touches like anodized gold aluminum trim, a plush interior, and details that made it stand out as the crown jewel of Plymouth's lineup. The designers didn't want just another family car. They wanted something that said performance and style. Now comes the fun question. What made this Fury move so quickly compared to its siblings? The answer was a 302 cubic inch polyhead V8 engine. This was no ordinary motor. It was borrowed from the Canadian Chrysler Windsor, a surprising choice, but one made for a clever reason. It was eligible for NASCAR racing. Plymouth engineers added upgrades like a high-performance camshaft, solid valve lifters, domed pistons, a 4-barrel carburetor, and dual exhausts that could sing a deep, powerful note. The result was 240 horsepower, which turned the Fury into the fastest road-legal Plymouth of its time. But wait, there's more to the story. While most Fury cars carried a single 4-barrel carburetor, a few special ones received a dual 4-barrel setup. Nobody knows exactly how many of these cars were made, but with only 4,485 Furies built in total for 1956, the number of dual-carb versions was likely just a few hundred. That little twist made those cars extra rare and exciting. The Fury didn't just look powerful, it looked like it had personality. Finished in a shade of sand dune white with shimmering gold accents, it had the kind of style that could outshine more flamboyant cars of the late 50s. Inside, drivers enjoyed a plush cabin with thoughtful details, making it both comfortable and bold. This particular Fury example went through a full restoration, with every piece carefully rebuilt and polished. It has even picked up trophies at shows, proving that its charm is still alive decades later. Stored in a heated garage for years, the car remains in remarkable condition, and when its V8 comes to life, it sounds just as strong as it did the day it first left the factory. Number 1. 1957 Mercury Turnpike Cruiser. The 1957 Mercury Turnpike Cruiser rolled into showrooms looking like it had driven straight out of a science fiction movie. Back in the golden age of chrome and tail fins, Mercury wanted a car that felt like tomorrow had already arrived. So they built the Turnpike Cruiser, a top-of-the-line machine packed with features no one had ever seen on a production car before. Just imagine walking into a dealership in 1957 and seeing this long, low, space-age marvel sparkling under the lights. How could you not stop and stare? The first thing that caught everyone's eye was the windshield. It didn't just wrap around the sides like other cars of the time, it stretched up into the roof, giving the driver a view of the world like no other. Then there were the roof vents, placed right at the outer edges like little futuristic gadgets. And of course, the famous power-operated rear window called the breezeway. With the push of a button, that 3-piece window slid down to let in fresh air, something neighbors surely talked about every time they saw it happen. Inside, Mercury gave drivers what they called the monitor control panel, which sounded more like something from a spaceship than a car. Here you found push-button controls for the transmission, an average speed computer clock that could calculate your travel pace, and even one of the very first tachometers ever offered as standard equipment on a post-war American sedan. The seats? They weren't ordinary either. They had a memory function called Seat-O-Matic that could adjust automatically, making you feel like royalty every time you climbed in. Of course, a car this bold needed the power to back it up. Beneath its long hood sat a 368 cubic inch V8 engine, delivering 290 horsepower, enough to cruise the brand new interstate highways with ease. And for drivers who wanted even more, Mercury offered the special M335 power package, which came with dual carburetors and boosted horsepower all the way up to 335. Those special cars were prepared by Bill Stropp's legendary speed shop and were aimed at making Mercury competitive in NASCAR racing. Finished in colors like Fiesta Red, Tuxedo Black, and trimmed with anodized gold, the Turnpike Cruiser didn't just look advanced, it was advanced. With only 23,268 cars produced in 2 years, and just over 1,000 convertibles, it remains one of the rarest and most fascinating creations of the 1950s. And that wraps up our journey through 12 legendary rides of the 1950s, each one a story on wheels. Which classic stole your heart? Drop a comment, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more timeless car adventures.